Is agentic AI a real shift in the enterprise design, or is it another hype cycle like many of these hype cycles that we have seen previously?
It's not something that's on the horizon, it's actually here. People are more interested in seeing the glitzy side of AI and not interested in dealing with the construct of it. So there's a tremendous pressure on the people responsible for delivering AI to act fast and get the ball rolling.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are back with another podcast, very interesting podcast today about the modern CIO and how the modern CIO is navigating the current technology landscape challenges. So today's podcast is mainly focusing on leading through data, AI, and uncertainty. So that is something which probably every CIO around the world is currently facing. So today we have Aditya Kaushik, who is the CIO at ZMI Holdings. Aditya brings with him around 28 years of technology leadership experience. He's led large digital transformation across multiple sectors, includes oil and gas, aviation, construction, and marine industry. So apart from that, he's very passionate about IT, and along with that, AI, IoT, and business transformation. So Aditya specializes in bridging that gap between technology innovation and the business, driving business outcomes. So welcome, Aditya. It is fantastic to have you here on our fireside chat. We are looking forward to hearing all about your experience and how you've been navigating technology all these years.
So thank you for the invite. A very interesting topic as well to discuss today. It's something that's quite relevant to the times. So thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Fantastic. So let's start. One of the challenges which, CIOs face, we have already touched on what is our topic. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of technology, let's get to kind of know you a little better. Give us a little bit of information on your journey in technology, as well as how you got into the leadership space.
So my journey actually started about 3 decades ago. It's 31 years, not 28 years.
Amazing.
So it's been 3 decades. I started off in what we used to call at that point a message editing unit. So pretty much tech, but not more back-end tech within aviation. A critical role, and I mainly was focused on the fact that we had to provide support and services to the frontline operations. Then I moved into operations, went into IT mainstream, everything from the early days of mainframe to evolving systems as we've seen over the years. So there has been a rapid change in the way the systems have evolved. But what has also changed is the role of the leadership, how leadership has also evolved from just simply being the people who sit in these large rooms, giving answers to everything that's being asked of them, and owning the responsibility of success, to a distributed responsibility where every leader has a certain accountability of business outcome within their organization, which has changed quite extensively. When I left aviation, I was still in the front line. I was also part of sales for almost 5 years, which was actually a very interesting shift for my career, because it puts you on the other side, understanding the business language, understanding what the business expects of us, and what is it that we are doing to achieve the business outcomes. And this is with or without technology. I mean, the early days were not that dependent on technology. Technology was providing what I would call the foundation systems. And most of the work was actually in person, based on trust, based on human relations, but definitely very strong on process and very strong on policy, governance, and frameworks. Especially within aviation, I think resilience or response to uncertainty is not something that you do out of a one-off or one chance. You do it as part of the drill. And it's kind of ingrained in the culture of the organization. So from there, I moved to different organizations, construction, moved to EPC, construction in the oil and gas field. And now I'm in maritime, which is another heavily regulated industry. But I think over the years, my shift has been around execution. My passion has moved more from technology to the change the technology brings within the business. And I think that's where my focus on transformation has been, because I see myself as a person who affects change, not as a person who implements technology. And that mindset is slightly different than a person who implements technology. I won't say either one is right or wrong. There are critical requirements for both roles. You still need to implement technology. But if your mindset is driven towards the business outcomes, then you're more attuned to what's happening within the organization, and you can respond better with what the business expects out of you. So you're not actually stuck or limited by what technology you're implementing. And I think the leadership role, I would say, is getting more and more distributed. Every person in the organization is driven to ownership, accountability. In the future, when you have an agentic workforce, you'd have to establish that same culture within autonomous agents as well. It's a question that people are not delving with, but I think there is recognition that a blended workforce needs to be understood, and what decisions would still sit with humans and what should be transferred to the autonomous agents as well. So I think over the 3 decades, I've seen technology change. I've had the opportunity to work through different sectors. I've worked both on the side of the technology and on the side of the commercial and the business stream as well, which has helped me to give me a more holistic view, understand what the board expects of us. So yes, it's been an incredible journey, and it's going to only get more interesting with AI.
Indeed, indeed. I think you touched upon the nerve of this whole podcast. We'll get to it. We'll get to the Agentic AI part. But before that, there's also a couple of other things I just want to our viewers to understand as a journey into the leadership role, into the CIO role. What were your some of the key challenges, if you can look back and see probably 1 or 2 mistakes that actually taught you something which made you grow? Because normally mistakes are seen as probably sometimes that can stop someone's career growth. But in this case, if you have some experiences, I think that will help our viewers as well understand that mistakes are no longer something that can stop career growth or will stop career growth, but we can learn from it and grow even better.
I think mistakes is when there's a disconnect between what's expected and what the outcome is. And there's a definition and a rule. One man's perspective is different from another. The important thing here is that you actually understand that when an outcome is not achieved and a certain blocker is received, or you see that there are challenges, which has happened during my experience as well, is that you are able to adapt very quickly. You're able to understand where the challenge is. You're able to course correct, and you're able to change and report effectively and communicate the consequences or impact to the business. A lot of times we are more focused on the final outcome and only reporting the outcome, not focused on the journey, not focused on how we get to the outcome. And we take some level of communication for granted, because in an organization, you have people all working towards their own objectives. Everyone has a focus area of what they want to achieve. There are personal ambitions, there are aspirations, there are people who are actually transitioning careers, who are working their way up the ladder. And there are new people who are actually learning and growing at the same time. So if you think about an organizational perspective, it's always very fluid. And I think during the times that I used to work in operations, mistakes had consequences. So you had to be very, very clear about what you did. And you had to be honest about something that was missed, so that there are no consequences that might further ripple down into the the customer space or the operations.
Absolutely.
And I think that level of integrity helps you to overcome any challenges that you have, any mistakes or any gaps or any kind of stumbling blocks that you face in the environment. And that also opens the door for being able to improve your leadership style as well. Because as leaders, you need to be trusted. As leaders, you need to build the integrity that people can depend on you to not just find the answers, but guide the people or guide the outcome when answers are not available. you don't always know what the final outcome is going to be. So I think it's important for us to understand that mistakes are what they are. It is a gap between the understanding and what the outcome should have been. As long as they are reported transparently, honestly, and they are addressed, and we are able to adapt and change, then you can work and overcome them.
Yeah, I mean that's a very crucial point you made. I think one other aspect as a leader, in the industry is also a key component is communication. I just want to, quickly understand from you, what is your communication style when it comes to, because you specialize in bridging the gap between technology innovation and communication with the manage business outcomes. So what is your communication style which our viewers can take away today?
Upfront, honest, break the bad news early. That's my style.
That's amazing. I think that's kind of sets the expectation early on.
I think it's always helped because if you're working in an environment, and I would definitely credit this to my own experience or my working experience, I've always found that people are expecting you to inform them, not just when things go well, but also when things may go wrong. And there's a significant difference there. You don't wait for something to go wrong. You anticipate as a leader what the consequence could be. You prepare for it, and you act, and you involve as many people that may be impacted by that outcome. And I think if you are clear and honest about, and it's a lot to do with your personal values, but it's also got a lot to do with the organization cultures as well. Some organizations prefer to only share good news. Some organizations want to limit the level of exposure. But I think it builds significant integrity and significant trust value if you are transparent and consistently honest about what you have to communicate.
I think that's a very important, the two important words that you've spoken, one of them being trust, because I think that drives leadership all along.
Yes.
Because what differentiates between an employee and a leader is the level of trust that a leader brings into the organization, and which can drive the entire department or the entire practice.
Yeah. I mean, it applies to the employees as well. It applies to everybody who's within the organization. But yes, there's an expectation or inherent expectation of the leaders having to carry that position of trust and can be dependable to the rest of the organization.
Absolutely. No, 100%. And jumping onto, as a segue into what we have already been speaking about, in today's, something about your mindset today that is different from earlier in your career. What is it that you can tell our viewers about the mindset?
Nothing has changed. I'm still as curious as I was 30 years ago. I'm still excited about technology. I still treat everything new as new. And I think that's the ethos of my change and transformation mindset. It may sound corny, but it's almost like the principle against which you can generate enthusiasm within your teams, within your organization, because someone has to lead the outcomes. And if you have that passion has to be translated through curiosity and critical analysis, and translating that into a vision and an outcome. And I think that's the mindset that I have worked from day one, and it's still there today.
Amazing. I think that also attributes to the reason why you're being successful in your career, because of having the curiosity with you all along. Doesn't matter 3 decades plus, and continuing to have that curiosity.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important point you made. From a priorities wise, what is currently on your desk as a CIO? What are your top priorities?
First is realigning the IT organization for the future. It's important that while you're developing or while you're implementing AI within the organization, you also don't lose sight of developing your own organization, the IT organization, to adapt and effectively manage or work with AI. So creating the organization for the future is priority one. Delivering AI at enterprise level in the organization is priority two. And being able to build and effectively establish the data and process foundation, and also the business application ecosystem for supporting this new wave of AI is definitely priority as well. I wouldn't say it's 1, 2, 3, but I would say these are the top 3 priorities in whichever order that I'm focusing on the day.
Okay, that actually segues into the next question that I want to know, or rather hear from you, your thoughts. What has become, significantly harder when you're leading technology compared to the last few years? If you think about today, what do you think has become harder?
I wouldn't say it's become harder. I would say the goalpost has changed. It's a different concept. It's different way of thinking. If you were to say that even at the time when people were talking about cloud migration, it seemed unattainable for certain people. Large organizations, quite a few, large number of organizations avoided it for a period of time. And there was always a mix and a blended, and people were trying to figure out what's the best ratio of on-prem and cloud. So I think people had to do the same working as they had to do. But I think the only differential here is that now we are dealing with systems that are not passive or configurable, but systems that can think and can be made to think or can be configured to think. We're talking about intelligence rather than just mainframe servers and switches that you configure to rule and then they perform. Of course, these systems can be also configured in the same manner, but you also have the inherent need to build that autonomy within them, which then has a much more far-reaching impact within the organization. So I think the key difference is that you cannot just simply deploy AI, but you have to think about the impact on the organization almost at the same time, besides the fact that the investment needs to create value for the organization, but also what would the future for the organization or for the industry look like? And I think that futuristic understanding needs to be bought in, which then brings a level of uncertainty for the CIO and the leaderships. But that's something that they have to now embrace, and that's a reality that they have to keep up with.
That's a good point you make, especially because over the years, you would have seen right from Y2K where, things were a bit chaotic. And then came cloud adoption. And again, cloud adoption had its own challenges. Organizations, like you rightly said, some of them had negative outlook on cloud adoption, and things moved from on-prem to cloud and hybrid. All the various mix and match what works for different organizations. But when you talk of AI and when you talk of data right now, I want to touch upon a little bit on the data side of things.
Sure.
Because when we say AI by itself, yes, we have agentic AIs, and like you rightly said, that they can be configured to think and make certain levels of decision.
Yes.
And take certain actions based on those decisions. But all this goes back to the fact that an organization needs to have the right kind of data. And as a CIO, which the responsibility of ensuring either agentic AI or any kind of machine learning that has been brought in as solutions in an organization, they depend heavily on the data that is fed into the agentic AI or the machine learning systems or applications. How do you see data as a key component within an organization, and what attributes of data should the current organizations that are going through transformation, what should they be looking at when they think of data?
You obviously need to think of it almost like going back to the drawing board. The data that exists within organizations today is serving the purpose today. It's, residing in ERPs, CRMs, systems that are defined by rules, have predictable functions, managed by people within the organization. And they, on a month-on-month or an year-on-year basis, provide the necessary information needed for the leadership. Sometimes sketchy. There are obviously gaps, but they serve the purpose as of today. When you are building AI or you're bringing AI within the organization, the system, the technology itself is a rapidly evolving technology even while you're implementing it, which is one of the challenges. What you have today, it's still in its own evolution, which means you have to be rapidly evolving even the framework that you are actually going to deploy, which is a good thing, but also requires a certain amount of agility and adaptability within the leadership as well, and within the technology team. What they have to do, however, is prepare or position or reconfigure, reclassify, let's say, re-identify the data primarily for the purpose of the models that we are going to develop. And this cannot be done in isolation in the same way that we have always had the problem of data silos within functions. We have to be able to identify, catalog, contextualize data in a more effective manner now than what was being done in the past. And I think that's intrinsically also linked with what I feel with the business process as well, because business processes create this data that is actually residing within the organization. So I don't think it's the volume that's an issue. I don't think it's where it's located. I think it's about the ownership and creating the right context of data and creating a map of data that actually works effectively to meet the objectives of the models that we are building. Because what AI would do is that it would rapidly expose these gaps, and it will do it very effectively. Sometimes it would may also, if you're talking about agentic AI, if improperly configured or having, let's say, an invalid source of data, may actually result in outcomes that might be detrimental to the organization. So I think the importance of data has always been there, but it's always been a back-end collection or a feed of information that people have used for, let's say, visualizing dashboards and identifying trends. But now we are consuming, or we are hoping to consume, the data in a more proactive manner. And I think this rethinking is required. You need to have proper governance around it. You need to have proper stewardship, ownership. But besides all these words, you need to have a seamless understanding of every person within the organization being able to understand what contributes to this model actually functioning within my organization. So you need to create that, not just the AI ownership, but a data ownership within the organization. And every function can actually successfully do that if you were to do it the right way.
I think very valid points. And our listeners who are thinking of how AI can be successful within their organization have to take a step back and look at the data. What kind of data they have. And if I understand, if I understood what you just said, I think one of the key components will be for the leadership team in especially the technology leadership team to look at what is the quality of data that is currently present. And if AI consumes the data, then what is the kind of outcome or the output which they can expect out of the data. So very valid point there. And one of the key topics of our today's conversation is also to touch upon the data aspect. So we'll delve a little bit deeper into that. So one of the questions segueing into that is, one of the questions is, in your experience, when you interact with a lot of other industry leaders in the technology space as a CIO, why do you think many organizations are still struggling to become truly data-driven? Because this segues into having effective AI frameworks rolled out or AI solutions in place. Why do you think they are still struggling to become data-driven, and what does AI ready really mean?
Because I would say it's a task by itself. It's an activity that they have to undertake. We've kind of kept data in the dark silos for a long period of time, and parts of it has been channeled into, as I said, functions and applications that need to visualize or need to sort of highlight that data. But now we are required to reconfigure and recontextualize the data for a absolutely brand new technology. And I think to some level, the outcomes that, because when you are configuring the models, they are heavily dependent on your business rules, your business processes, and the source of information that you are retaining. That needs to be cleaned, and that needs to be a set of information that can be effectively utilized in the configuration or the building of the model. So I think the challenge comes from the enormity of the data. Now having to deal with everything from scratch again, things you had forgotten or you had left them to function on a normal day-to-day basis have to be redone again. Also for organizations and functions or sectors that are working on high volume data like retail, healthcare. There's also levels of sensitivity, regulations, and controls that also present their own challenges when you are to ingest this data within the AI models. And I think it's almost like you have to rethink your strategy around data again than what you were doing all along. So if you are implementing a significantly, what I would call a futuristic technology within the organization, it's important for you to start at the basic foundation. It's important for you to check whether your foundation has over time become weak or has, sort of gathered dust, I would say. And part of that requires that you need to be able to identify what's relevant, what's important, what's not relevant, and then work with what will be useful for the development of this new technology. And I think that requires an effort by itself. And sometimes people are more interested in seeing the glitzy side of AI and not interested in dealing with the construct of it. So there's a tremendous pressure on the people responsible for delivering AI and the technology leaders to act fast and not have to complain or talk about data so much or the framework so much, but get the ball rolling. And I think that balancing act is what's causing probably the pressure point, as you mentioned.
I think that's fantastic point you made there. Some of those are so relevant, even as we see in the industry. Very large enterprises still struggling to get a hold of their data because things like garbage in, garbage out still applies today.
Yeah.
The terminology that we heard in the 70s and 80s, garbage in, garbage out, when it comes to computers, still stands valid with everything that you've just mentioned. Now, my next question is more around Agentic AI, which I'm sure our viewers will be very keen to get to. Is Agentic AI a real shift in the enterprise design, or is it another hype cycle like the many of these hype cycles that we have seen previously?
I would say it's extremely powerful. It's not something that's on the horizon. It's actually here. And it's being adopted actively, sometimes with or without the knowledge of the organization, which presents its own challenges. But at the same time, I think majority of the organizations or majority of the people are still using the AI as an answering model and just solving their problems. But the capability has evolved to the point where you can very rapidly move to autonomous processes. There's conversation about the fact whether every organization has to define what business outcome is going to be achieved through AI, what value they're going to achieve by delivering AI, and also to some level being able to identify that sweet spot where they feel that, yes, they can find that balance between what is done by the human workforce and what's being done by the agentic workforce. In terms of the model or the technology itself, it's evolving daily. It's getting more and more effective, more and more powerful. It's learning to communicate with other agents. It's getting more and more autonomous. So it's just a matter of time when that becomes the definition of what the world would look like versus the time when the first computers came on and everybody felt whether we would have a job and what we're going to do next. And I think the world over time embraced the technology and people had to reconfigure their skill sets and to be able to adapt to what that technology was at that point in time. If you look today, that's the same scenario that's happening. And the fact that it is democratized across with outside the organization and in the hands of people today, because we've evolved in an environment where sometimes the technology in the hands of the employees is far more superior than the legacy systems we run within the organization, right? And so you have a smarter workforce, you have a more intelligent workforce that can do their personal day-to-day jobs, spin off businesses, do their grocery list or their shopping activities using AI, but they cannot process a basic invoice using AI. So this paradox is turning to be a challenging scenario for every organization. But I think the tools are here. The technology is evolving. It's important for technology leaders to stay abreast with what's happening. Identify within your organization where is the best focus of deploying and identifying value, and what changes you can bring within the organization by deployment of agentic AI. But I think it's exciting times ahead. Hype is part of the cycle, because anything new obviously generates a hype. We don't know what's next after agentic AI, but the hype has been, I think the cycle of evolution has reduced considerably. What used to happen over 5 years or decades is now happening within months and days. And I think that's where we are having to catch up.
I think that's a very interesting and worrying point for some people, because as humans, we did have that learning period, what I call, because when you talk of years, there was time for adaptation and adoption. But now when it is months and days and sometimes hours, when you have a perfectly learning algorithm that can make a huge difference for an organization, the workforce that actually utilizes this agents for them to adopt and adapt both ways becomes a challenge. And within your experience, have you seen that kind of challenges coming up?
It's the nature of evolution, right?
But it's very fast now. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, but the people who are challenged are the ones who are on the other side of evolution. If you think about today's workforce, the Gen Z or the Gen Alpha, as we call them, they are by birth attuned to technology. We came from an era where technology was introduced to us when we were in our workplace or in college. So we are not what I would call naturally abled for technology. We've had to catch up. And we can see that difference between the new employees or the new workforce that's within the organization and how adept they are at using devices. Some of us still think that we need a large screen and a laptop to do a job, while there are people running businesses on their mobile handsets, right? And they don't even touch the laptops. So I think it's also got to do with the fact whether you want to think whether this technology is for you or is your job only to enable it for the future generation. And if that's the case, then you need to do that right. And the next generation, which has actually, if you think about from an education system as well, the education system did not adopt the teaching of AI yesterday. They have been doing it for years. Python came on board long time ago, and people started learning coding at a time when machine learning and coding was quite a fad, right? So you have a wave of people coming in, and sometimes the perspective of will AI take the jobs of the people that are currently working? Yes, up to the point that they don't adapt to the use of AI. They will face some level of risk. But for the new generation that's coming in, they're coming in already adept with using AI. So they will find themselves at home when they enter the organization. And they will come prepared to use AI. If there is no AI, they might feel out of place. And I think that's the paradox or the challenge that we have, because it all depends on from which perspective you're looking at. And if I was to look at from people who have been in the leadership and the technology leadership for years, I think their role is to effectively execute the deployment or the adoption of AI within the organization, of course, within the appropriate ROI and value realization and business outcome, but to prepare this modern organization for the future generation. And I think that's the role we have till we retire. So I don't see the challenge for the next generation. I see a challenge for the receding generation.
I think it's well put, because in terms of being AI ready and coming into the work environment adds significant value to the organization as well, because the time taken to train an employee when they first join an organization, that that time reduces drastically as well, because what we call as the lead time until an employee becomes useful in an organization, because the training period, onboarding, training, all that is now that timeline is shortened quite a lot, given that we have AI already in the organizations, and organizations already working on it. So I do have a very important question. I'll keep it for the end, but I want to touch on the next question. Just pick your brain on this part. Like, what is the difference between AI assistants and AI agents in a real business environment? I think you spoke about it briefly, how AI is being used, but we want to get to a point now to the answers to this. What do you think based on your experience around AI assistants and AI agents?
So, I mean, if you're talking about chatbots that are configured on certain rules and predictive answers, versus agentic AI that can be configured to determine the course of the next action, which is the key differentiator here, where it's not confined by a rule that's written for it. It is able to continuously adapt by reflecting on the defined rule, the data set that it's provided, and the action that has been tasked, and be able to make some decisive actions. And I think this is the key differentiator, which is leading to this conversation about which at what part do we, and to what level and what faculty of intelligence do we allow the autonomous agents to carry, and what faculty should stay within the human intelligence, which has then evolved into this terminology of human in the middle, where you want to gradually but surely supervise some level of action. And we've heard about supervised learning and unsupervised models. And so we know that we have now reached that point. Deterministic AI was still governed much more effectively. I think with agentic AI, people have to evolve the governance model and be able to measure those actions more effectively. Because the purpose of bringing the agentic AI is so that it can move faster, execute faster, and take away this the latency that we are experiencing with the current processes and the actions that we do. But then you also want to monitor and control with that same speed, so that if you have to do a course correction, you can do it effectively. So I think there are the treatment of how governance has to be deployed on these models has to be addressed more effectively. But I think that's one of the key differences, that it's not just limited to responding to queries or responding to certain actions that are information centric only, but being able to give that ability to act upon its own intelligence.
A good point. And you touched upon governance. So I just want to segue into that a little.
Yeah.
As far as normal processes within an organization is concerned, there have been plenty of frameworks, over the last few decades. How do we set up governance frameworks over technology, so that the right kind of guardrails can be put in place? And the way we look at risks, technology risks, has traditionally been similar over the last, I should say, a few decades. And when cloud kind of came into the picture, you had the SaaS model, PaaS, and infrastructure as a service, the kind of risks we saw, and the kind of compliance obligations we had was very specific. And they were quite straightforward, and looking at how we manage those risks were quite easy, and how we put governance guardrails around it was also quite simple, considering where we are today when you think of agentic AI, and how do we set up governance around it? How do we identify what risks can a certain agentic AI for that matter, application bring to an organization? Because there are the known knowns and the known unknowns. The known knowns are quite easy to deal with. And when you look at risk and when you look at security as such, the known unknowns are something that it's a boardroom conversation today, because plenty of boards, the audit committees that are part of the board, they are all kind of curious and also asking these questions. So what does this mean? What kind of risks are we bringing into the organization, or what are the compliance obligations if we are going to, like, there are global compliance, like be it the GDPR of EU, or even UAE's own PDPL, which is around personal data protection law, which emphasizes that data privacy be given utmost importance in organizations. Similarly, we have regulations in Saudi Arabia, we have regulations in Qatar, we have regulations in Oman. All, if you look at the Middle Eastern countries, have been quite on the so to use a cricket language, front foot, that they have been looking at how to adopt AI.
Yes.
And enable organizations. They have been quite proactive, all the regulators in the Middle East. So with all these things happening simultaneously and the boardroom conversations happening, how do we manage these risks? What are our compliance obligations? Especially when we talk of highly regulated environment, there are huge compliance obligations. And also putting governance models around this also becomes quite challenging. So as a CIO of a large entity, and also someone who's been dealing with this head on over the last year or two, when agentic AI has become more prominent, how do you foresee this, or what do you suggest that organizations think of when it comes to AI governance, AI security, AI risk, AI compliance? Your thoughts on that, I think, will be very beneficial to our users, our podcast listeners, so that they can actually adopt and learn from your experience in dealing with this particular situation.
So governance in AI cannot be a PDF that sits on people's folder structure and sits with the risk team. And it cannot also be effectively deployed with periodic audits or observing the log. And I think that's where the gap is. We are using traditional means to view where the risk is. While with AI, it's important pretty much how we did for, as you mentioned, cloud governance. With every technology that came in the past, we changed our governance framework and we changed our ability to analyze where risk would reside. And I think the same activity needs to be undertaken again. You cannot build governance for AI using the previous models. You have to understand where the models act. Primarily, before that, you need to understand how the models are configured, what data they ingest, what are the rules of the ingestion of the data, what actions are they defined to carry out, and where is this action impacting and which area of business is it impacting, and what material or, let's say, potential financial or impact that this has. If you take it from, let's say, a couple of perspectives, let's say look at healthcare, for example. If you configure an agent that informs the patients of taking the regular medication, you want to be sure that it gives the right medication advice to the right patient. It does not deviate from that plan. And if the medicine does change, it does not see it as an anomaly, but actually adapts to provide the right advice, whether it's the dosage or the frequency. And you need it to function with the same certainty that our cybersecurity systems work or any other technology works within the organization. So dependability definitely is a key requirement. Impact on business, impact on safety and health is another key requirement. And also the impact on what function and what customer experience is it elevating. But you cannot go after 6 months or 3 months and look at the log files and analyze it, because with the speed at which these models are expected to operate, these tasks or these rules have to be written into the operating model for these agents. You need to be able to, as you mentioned, the guardrails. They cannot be limited by the fact that they are only there in case it deviates, or identify anomalies and send me an alert, because that's too little too late possibly. So I think it's important that, and also at the same time, we have been talking about the fact, and a couple of consulting firms, advisory firms emphasize the point that we need to defragment, or we need to consolidate governance. You have financial governance, you have risk and operational governance, and you have compliance, and you have safety, health and safety. So there are many elements, and they all have different frameworks, different regulators, as you talked about. But how do you bring it all together? Because when you are building AI models, they are more pervasive than other technologies. They work across functions, and they embed themselves into different functions, and then they interact with other agents. So what you're looking for is a governance activity that has to be undertaken intentionally by the business, and I'm not saying just the IT team, but also taken by the governance and risk and compliance teams. But they all need to come together to build this new version of AI governance, and try and understand how to incorporate it at the very start, during the process, and also to evaluate at the time where the outcome is delivered. And it is challenging, I would say, because certain models are black boxes. You cannot figure out what they're doing. It's just magic, right? Very delightful for the organizations and for the individuals,
Yes.
but very worrying for the regulators. And they want to understand the building blocks and the bones behind what has got this outcome, which then creates this competitive disadvantage between these large models that actually want to keep it black boxed and contained. But I think if we were to focus on the application of the model within the organization and step through the interaction points and the rules that we have configured and the ingestion point of the data and the outcomes that it's supposed to have, then you can build an intrinsic governance model. So we have to step away from traditional models. We have to rethink of how governance is deployed within an organization, because you are pretty much changing the way the business works.
That's interesting. So I have another question with regard to that. Where does the responsibility and accountability of AI agents, or with whom in an organization, does it rest? Does it rest with the CIO, the CEO, the board? Is there a chief data and AI officer? The newly created roles in organizations. Where should the responsibility and accountability sit?
It sits on everyone. I think we've long even siloed responsibility, and we've tried to fragment it between different C-level roles and see if anybody is who's responsible for what. In terms of the functioning, yes, that sounds logically correct, because you want financial accountability to sit within the CFO role. You want risk to sit within the risk function. But I think AI is going to be a differentiating factor. It's going to require for organizations to not shirk away from a consolidated responsibility, because eventually the actions of the AI model are going to impact the business, and we all are participant in the success of the business. So to think in a fragmented manner and see that the responsibility is only where the model is running. So if it's running in supply chain should take responsibility. Functionally, yes, the responsibility sits with supply chain. It also sits with the team that's actually configured the model. And if the outcomes are going astray, then someone needs to, the AI team needs to correct it. But if the outcome is customer facing, it's going to impact both the credibility and the reputation of the organization. Yeah. So it should run through the vein of the organization across top to bottom and bottom to up. It should not be limited to the fact that it's only responsible for the people who are looking at the models. And I think this is also something that, in terms of execution, you have to build into the target operating model of an AI implementation. You have to ensure that roles that play a crucial responsibility today are all of their various functions, are also participant into the design, into the development, into the finalization of owning that model that's going to run within their business function. So once you have that adaptive, the acceptance of the models, then there will be more accountability between where the models work and how can you analyze the responsibility of these models. But everyone's responsible.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it just doesn't sit in one department or doesn't work for one individual in an organization.
Yeah, certain responsibilities will sit with specific functions, quite like any other system or a business process.
Yeah.
But in terms of can we find somebody who will be responsible if everything goes wrong? Well, everyone will have to be responsible.
Okay, that's an interesting point. We'll see how that evolves,
Yes.
because there's always when everything goes fine, everyone's happy. When things go downhill, there's always someone who needs to be responsible for these things. But that's I think a conversation for another day, because that is evolving as well. Responsibility and accountability when it comes to agentic AIs and AI solutions in an organization. Probably one important question, if not the last. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about 2030. There's if you look at the strategies of organizations, or even strategies of countries for that matter, even Dubai for that matter, they has the 2030 vision, and where the country wants to be, or how the administration should function. Similarly, other countries also have similar vision and the view on where they want to be by 2030. So my next question is that, if you are looking ahead to 2030 as a CIO, as a leader in the IT space, what do you think will disappear? What will become critical? And how will the CIO role itself evolve? What do you foresee?
So, from my point of view, I would say, first of all, the national ambition is a crucial area that actually helps the ecosystem or the organizations or the companies that actually are part of the economy of that nation. UAE has obviously pitched itself as a futuristic nation that will adopt and embrace AI very rapidly. And I think we've seen this even on the digitization of the government functions quite rapidly. We all know how long it takes for us to now carry out government services, which seems like a breeze and is something that we are all beneficiary of. So I think that framework is something that provides a tremendous opportunity for the companies that work within this country, and that presents the ability for us to be able to take that on within our organization, translate that as the organization's ambition for AI, and be able to sort of align with the strategic vision of the nation. In terms of the roles, if I was to look ahead 4 years, I would say it would be in phases. I would say roles that are very process heavy, very functional, very repetitive, will definitely be impacted first and will disappear, as you said. Roles around the functions of finance and procurement and even IT service management and parts of IT functions will all evolve into being, sort of optimized through the use of AI. Critical thinking, analysis, decision making, business model changes. Those are things that will still stay and would probably would be part of the human faculty, I would say. Once we've kind of evolved the basic fundamental roles, I think the next phase would be around process-driven roles, which are operational roles and functional roles, which may change even the model of businesses or the business model in some organizations. I won't say it's going to be everywhere, but they would probably come next, where you would see that once you see the success of the agentic AI or the AI within the basic foundational roles, the company's appetite for expanding it into other areas will automatically increase. And the role for the CIO has to be aligned with this level of intelligence. So we used to talk about CIOs being responsible for the core technology, CIOs being responsible for digital transformation, CIOs being responsible for enabling the business. And I think now they have to be responsible for enabling the intelligence. Right? Because I think they cannot step aside or just watch or play a partial role. It is something that they have to do front and center. They have to understand the strategic impact that this technology can bring within the organization. They need to be able to develop the roadmap and own the roadmap of actually effectively deploying AI, and take this opportunity of the national vision and the investment that UAE today has towards AI. At the same time, they need to be able to find the right talent, create the organization for the future, understand and realign towards the changing and the evolving potential of AI. And I think all of this needs to be done fairly rapidly, much faster than what we did before, because we do need to create the world for the next generation. And I see that an extremely important goal for the evolving leadership or CIOs within the organizations.
Amazing. So I have a segue question. It just flashed to me. Talking about speed of adoption, we have quantum, which is a buzzword along with AI.
Yeah.
Though quantum, we don't hear much about quantum computing. It's all in the labs and
Yes.
experimentation. We have the who's who of the world working on it. What happens when quantum comes in and then we have AI jumping on quantum? What do you think will be the result?
I mean, I see that I would say, and this is just the way I would look at it.
Yeah.
An AI ready organization may embrace quantum better, because you need that level of intelligence within the organization to be able to embrace this next phase of the evolution that's going to happen. In terms of whether every organization will adopt, it's going to be the same story as was with cloud computing, as with agentic AI or AI, and with quantum as well. But I think this would be essentially something that organizations that are ready and that have pivoted into the business model that's actually AI enabled would probably be best placed for having the foundation to adopt the next evolution. But organizations that are still in the traditional phases may find it more difficult. I mean, I see that as a natural evolution. How fast it'll happen, I don't know. It's moving too fast, or fast enough for us to keep up, I would say, or to be able to execute it before the next thing is around the corner. So I think we've seen this happen multiple times, but I think we've kind of sometimes taken it as obvious. If you think about the evolution of the iPhone, or moving away from those touchpad phones, I don't think anybody remembers how fast they moved into it and how fast they adopted the ability to use these devices, or the new applications that are rolled out on a continuous basis. So I think to some level, even we will evolve, and we are evolving. We are taking and absorbing and consuming technology, even AI, almost without our intrinsic knowledge, and becoming extremely, I would say, dependent on it to some degree. What we need to do is to be able to utilize it more effectively, and to be able to actually work with it far more powerfully than what we do today. So I think that evolution will happen. Organizations that will evolve into an AI enabled or an AI ready organization may adopt the next phase of evolution, and that could be quantum computing as well.
Okay, that's interesting, because quantum computing is something which every listener will want to hear more about. I think we should do another fireside chat about it. Sure. But before I let you go, there's something that's been in the back of my mind, especially around we are seeing Tesla. I'm naming the company because it's in the news. It's nothing controversial, but they're working on something called as humanoids.
Yeah.
And given the industry you come from, in marine and aviation, and the kind of experience you have, oil and gas, do you think humanoids will become part of those industries? Because there are high risk jobs. Think of oil rigs, for that matter, in the middle of the ocean. Do you think humanoids will evolve, or are they on the way? When do you think that'll happen?
If the regulators accept it, then why not? I think it has to be assessed, and it will gradually find its place. It is moving very rapidly. We've seen that across many parts of the world, where they're becoming almost, intrinsic to the basic functions, not just basic function, caregivers, household activities. So that is a future that's on the horizon. Whether it'll be embraced and to what degree it'll be embraced within different business functions, it's going to be on the same parameter as the adoption of, agentic AI. At what level do you see the investment holds enough value, both from risk perspective, from health and safety perspective, also from in terms of the ROI that investment is going to be sufficient for us. There's the faculty of decision making that has to be done within certain industries. Some which is fairly predictable and routine. That's where they will fit into place. And I think that automobile industries, the assembly lines which have predictive functions, are fairly taking advantage of this reduction of workforce and an adoption of autonomous humanoids working on the assembly lines. But areas where maybe the outcomes or the operations are not that predictable, and they have extensive deviations from day to day or operation to operation basis, maybe there will be a little bit more training or a little bit more adoption and evolution required before they can be adopted.
Yeah, no, that's good points you made. I think something that we will see evolve over the next few years.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much what I think topics that I want to touch on: data, AI, and the uncertainty, and your experience. Any final words for our listeners you think will add value? Please, we would like to hear that.
I think I would say stay curious and stay passionate. It is very exciting times for technology leaders. It's something that is quite crucial, as I said, of shaping the organizations for the future generation. AI can be I would say, a companion or a able tool or able technology that can help us, leapfrog what we are doing today. So I would say, stay curious and go for it.
Amazing. Fantastic. It was
Thank
amazing
you so much.
speaking to you. I think we have spent quite a bit of time talking through this, and I think we can continue for another few hours if we wanted to. But then we'll keep the rest of the questions for another day.
Yeah.
And always pleasure having you, Aditya, in our podcast. And we look forward to having you once again here to talk a little more about in the next few months as AI evolves, as data grows, the evolution happens, as we say, and as the uncertain clouds kind of clear away and there's a bit more certainty probably. We'll again catch up, have you on the podcast and listen a bit more about your journey, what it's been from today till the next podcast.
Sure.
So until then, thank you very much. It was fantastic having you on our podcast.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks. So thank you to all our listeners. So this has been amazing, spending time with Aditya and hearing his experience and his knowledge in this space. And we look forward to having Aditya once again on our podcast so we can listen to his future learnings in not so distant future, but as he evolves as well as a leader, technology leader, and his understanding, his experience on what he's seeing on the field as he implements AI and also interacts with other technology leaders across the industry. Until next time, as Aditya says, stay curious and keep learning.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.